Welcome to the Fee for Service Dentist Podcast. My good friend, Dr. Tom Reed, is going to share with us where does hygiene fit in and what are the numbers like when you're out of network? How important is that? And he dropped 1.5 hygiene. In other words, he went from 3.5 full-time hygiene to 2, and his number really doesn't reflect it. You're going to see, he's going to explain it because he dove into his own numbers and it's very enlightening. Now, if you have a chance to watch this, he's got some slides that we'll be using. We use the share screen again. Thanks, Ben, for getting me off the schneid trying that. And we'll see if we do a pretty good job, at least of verbalizing it if you don't watch the show. Again, our episode and our podcast is sponsored by Kettenbach Dental. They have a brand new product. It's a light cure nano hybrid composite. It's called Visalis Fill and Visalis Flow. It's highly filled, over 80%, and it's very high polishability. So it's a aesthetic restoration with high durability and strength. So it's a great posterior restoration. So it works in the anterior and the posterior. Low shrinkage and has long-term marginal integrity, which resists staining. Flex shades from A1 to A4, including a bleach and an opaque shade. So please check them out and try out this product. Kettenbach has a rep in your area. Reach out to them at 877-532-2123. Or if you want to go online, kettenbach-dental.us. If you like the episode, please click share with your friends. Like it, share it with your friends. If you don't like it, please tell me about it. I appreciate all of you. Hope that we are providing a good, valuable service for all of you. Have a great day, everybody.
My name is Drew Burns, and I'm a part of a small group of dentists who believe something crazy. We believe that the standard of care is just not good enough. We demand the best of ourselves and the best for our patients. We believe that the best way? No, the only way to practice dentistry is on our own terms. If you ask the dental consultants or the corporate CEOs, they tell you that what we're doing isn't smart, that fee-for-service dentistry is dead, and that the golden age of dentistry is over. Yet, while others focus on profits first, we focus on the patient first. And yet, our offices are some of the most profitable in the entire country because we invest in ourselves and we are doing things right. It's our name on the door and it's our reputation on the line. My name is Drew Burns and I am a fee-for-service dentist. This is the Fee-for-Service Dentist Podcast and these are our stories.
Welcome to the Fee-for-Service Dentist Podcast. Dr. Sonny Spear, and we have an old friend with us, Dr. Tom Reed, who we recorded a podcast with Tom. He told us about his journey into fee-for-service. He's in the Denver area and he consults with practices, runs a very successful practice, and has, I think, a couple of places. He has a flagship office as well as a couple others, I believe. So let's welcome Tom. How are we doing today, man?
Not too bad. It's a beautiful Memorial Day Monday. In Colorado, it's hard to stay inside most days, but when it gets nice out, we just live outdoors. And so had a really enjoyable day so far and looking forward to finishing up strong. But this was just an awesome opportunity to rejoin the podcast. I feel like kind of bullied my way back in, but I feel like what we want to talk about today is critical.
Oh, I don't think you bullied at all. I think the one thing I will say, if you guys have the ability, you all listening, please try to watch this on video, not because you want to see my ugly mug, but we're going to put some slides up that are going to talk about. I want you to just introduce the concept of what we're going to talk about and where this came from, because I think the genesis of this is really cool. So go ahead.
Yeah. It came about mostly because of, several reasons. One, it was born out of the basis of why at my practice, we elected to migrate away from all the insurance contracts over the last number of years and literally left Delta Dental at the end of 2022. And it was born out of the fact that we were just really seeing drastic reductions in revenue, net revenue, I should say, out of the hygiene department. And we were just working so hard for so little. And it just irritated me almost to a point where I was like, we got to do something about this. So that's part of it. The other part of it was in the past week, I had a private client. I was working with their hygiene department as they are migrating away from insurance contracts. And the owner dentist and her spouse were having a hard time really connecting with the hygiene team on the why. And so I came back in with a presentation to show them just how it's feasible to really work so much smarter and not be so stressed out and running around, as we know, with a chicken with your head cut off. So it was twofold.
So let's hit on the why. What was the why? What was it? What were they struggling with the why with their hygiene team?
The future of fee-for-service dentistry is based in membership patients. If you need help starting your membership plan, or if your plan is too big for your team to manage, visit dentalmembershipdirect.com to set up your free membership growth solution demo with our team.
Well, most of it is financial. I looked at they hired me last fall, and we started piecing through all the financials, and we noticed that, first of all, the doctor was producing the lion's share of the revenue, and we weren't even close to a 70-30 split or a 75-25 split. It was more like 80-20 or 85-15. And I kept saying to her, I'm like, you keep telling me your hygiene department's really full and busy. You don't have enough time to get to exams, yet the revenue does not reflect that kind of effort. So we got to figure out what's going on here. And in the midst of all of that, we began our journey of eliminating insurance contracts for them. So recently, I wanted to really dig deep into their numbers to see where we could make some improvements. They have 3 full-time equivalents, and basically we're writing off somewhere in the neighborhood of 50+% of their hygiene revenue coming through the door. And they were seeing a pretty high attrition rate despite a monstrous new patient number. So they weren't really growing the hygiene department yet. This doctor was burnt out. So that's sort of where we started.
So 50% of their hygiene revenue went to write-offs.
Yes.
So can you give me an example? Like, for example, hygiene comes in, let's do a prophy exam and 4 bite wings. Let's say the average fee for that procedure is $200.
That's reasonable.
And they're knocked down now to 100.
Yes.
What are they paying the hygienist hourly ballpark?
Their base rate was about $50.
50. So by the time you add everything else in, they're at 60, 65 just for labor.
Mm-hmm.
And now you've got the lights, the electric, and everything else. Would you say they're breaking even or not?
Well, I mean, if you use general principles of fixed variable plus non-doctor payroll, they're not breaking even.
They're not breaking even.
They're coming in upside down in that department. You're almost better off paying those patients not to come to you and make room for your fee-for-service folks or your membership plan patients. Or
well, that's concrete. Okay, let's keep going. Let's keep going with this then. So they have 3 full-time equivalents of hygiene, which let's say it's $1 million practice, they're bringing in $150,000 in revenue.
Yeah, that was about right.
Approximately.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So let's go. So the first thing you said that you did, you dug into your numbers, or you dug into their numbers?
Well, we were already going through their practice, and we audited it, several months prior. So because of that audit, the net result and seeing their data, it was time to ramp up, coach the team, and get them in that preparedness mode for migration away from insurance contracts. So it started off by coaching their front team, but this was a separate visit with the hygiene department where we really needed to rein it in. So I wanted a backdrop or a support mechanism for discussion purposes with them. So I analyzed my own progress from 2021 through present, just to see what has happened since we've migrated away from our two largest carriers, which was MetLife and Delta Dental, in 2021 and 2022 respectively. And it was pretty eye-opening to me personally on our own my own flagship practice, because we thought we had a pretty robust and healthy hygiene department, which I think I do, but the data was just astonishing, I should say. So
before we dive into the data, is there anything else you want to start with? Do you want to start with some
philosophical stuff or just KPI stuff? Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the ideal, we got to realize that the practice of dentistry, really a healthy dental practice, is at least a GP basis, revolves around a robust hygiene department.
I'm gonna try to share the screen here, folks, because Tom has put together a very nice PowerPoint. I'm gonna try to share the screen here. We've done this once before. This will be our second time. So I'm just gonna ask for your forgiveness before I start. Okay, so
sure.
The Doc Sites provides affordable and effective websites for dentists with no long-term contracts, transparent pricing, and great customer service, starting at only $59 a month. They also provide optional online marketing packages to help increase your online visibility. For special offers, including up to 25% off your website setup, text fee for service to 818-489-9823. 818-489-9823. This is a limited time offer, so text now and lock in your savings, and visit Doc Sites for more information. So let's go to, you want to start with this?
Yeah. So, I think basically, well, that Desert Hills Dental is their practice. That was the practice I was working on. So DHD.
All right. So we want to start on what we can.
Yeah. Let's go to what can be done. I think that would be good. So they were just struggling with ways to improve. So I just came up with this slide to say, what do we need to do in order to improve our performance and hygiene? And we talked about block scheduling, literally setting the platform or the parameters for the future. It's kind of hard to do when you've been playing Tetris for so long in your schedule, but we went out of ways and started blocking out perio holds, new patient holds, and then stuck with some very specific places where prophies and perio maintenance and pedos could be placed properly. And also, in order to eliminate some of the what they were dealing with was not paying enough attention to how many contracted prophies they were putting on the schedule each day. And they were stacking in a lot of PPO, heavily subsidized or reduced fee visits. And so they weren't making goals very easily. So that was.
Is part of their plan, though, trajectory to drop the insurances?
It is, but we're having to dole it out a little bit more methodically, because they're in a pretty heavy duty metro market, and the competition's a little steep, and so to not see people running for the hills, we've elected to be a little more systematic in our approach. So we've been going after the low hanging fruit first, and then working our way up to the big dogs. And that's
okay. So just gonna review this for a second. So block scheduling, if you're not familiar with that, what that is that's taking, let's say, every Wednesday from 1 to 2, and we're putting a block in there, do not book unless it's new patient or perio.
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that, right?
Yeah.
So then the next thing you looked at daily goals, and this one happens to be $1,500 per hygiene, for full-time hygiene. So also we hit on minimize the number of subsidized plans allowed. How are you accomplishing that?
Well, it really, what we discovered is that the hygiene team wasn't schooled or at least had a breadth of knowledge about how to look through their practice management system to really understand where these patients are, like looking at their contracts and making sure that they do a little insurance review before they reschedule patients, and paying more attention to where they're placing appointments.
Okay, so that's an overall schedule. So at each day, your front desk or your business administration people or your hygiene people who are doing the scheduling will see, okay, we already have 3 insurance X patients on this day. This person needs to go to another day then. Okay. So that's going to open some holes.
It will open some holes for them. It harkens back a little bit to what we discussed last time on our call, a little bit about capitation and and how we would manage around that years ago. It's not complicated. It just takes some effort.
It takes some discipline.
Discipline, yes. We also talked a lot about being a lot more diligent with defining an ideal schedule. Like, what does a day look like? And how many perio patients or how many quads of root planing and scaling can someone possibly handle in a day? How effective can they be on a new patient, and then multiply that out by X number of times in a day to make sure they're delivering a wow experience. And they were sort of stacking things in a little bit too much, and therefore running behind a lot. So,
and then you have noted, make the treatment as affordable as possible with the broader FA. Is that financing menu?
Financial arrangements menu. They had no options for financial arrangements out of just basically pay as you go, or nothing even more sophisticated than. Weren't really using Care Credit or Lending Point or Proceed or some of our other big options for third-party financing. We've worked on a internal. They have enough liquidity in their business to be comfortable with, maybe doing a little bit more internal financing and maybe setting up some flexibility there.
So let's go into that ideal hygiene schedule, because that's the next one that's up. If you're following along or you're watching this, we'll be seeing the slides, but as we're going to try to describe it a little bit. So the ideal hygiene schedule, why don't you get on that?
Yeah, I think for them, they wanted to make sure to be pre-blocked, like we said earlier, to allow for a proper ratio of periodic and maintenance. So periodic oral exams and evals, so prophies basically, new patients, and then the actual active perio, and try to unstack the day. They were really pretty heavily canted toward stuffing in patients basically where the patient wanted to be, as opposed to paying more attention to the financial elements. So, scheduling appropriately for a dollar amount as well as a workflow. This doctor was solo until the beginning of this year, and she was running pretty white hot in terms of number of examinations to get to still also then turn around and get back to the chair in order to properly manage and service the restorative care needs. Okay. And I don't know how they did it. When I looked at their schedule, it looked like Tetris to me. And I'm like, I'm not sure how you can follow this thing. So, and then coordinate it with operative, like I said, for continuity.
Yep.
And then, we also want to make sure we're also delivering on what patients are after. They want to be felt like they're significant. They're not just a number in the practice, that we respect their time. We educate them without going through the lecture series. We provide a warm and caring environment, and it's a good deal. It feels like it's of value for them to come in.
So, and your next one is teeth do not walk into the office. People do.
Right. And we all know and love LD Pankey, and one of our favorite heroes of dentistry.
It's funny. That's the one thing I had with the dental school experience. They get the loops on so quickly on these young dental students. I think it's the first week they're fitted and they wear loops for everything. And that just really magnifies the tooth and continues to minimize the person attached to it. So I kind of, that was my line in the sand a little bit. And I remember my son was in school and he did that. And then for a period of time, he had his loop stolen or misplaced or whatever. So he was missing them for almost 6 months. He did better on his dentistry. He did better on his clinical checkups. And I think he started, and this was by accident, mind you. He started to then have different conversations, and I said, "Well, you're starting to realize that it's attached to a human being, and that's the most important aspect. I know you got to focus on, the parallel walls and the proper beveling, et cetera, et cetera. However, your perspective's a little better. So anyway, that was a neat point.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, as I've gone into close to year 30 of private practice, I've realized just how dependent I am on loops. And I leave after a long clinical day and I get home and my eyes haven't adjusted yet. And I'm still looking for loops just to like read my email or, or look at something really basic with something the family might need me to help with at home or read some directions. I'm like, geez, I can't read this. I need my loops. It's really kind of unfortunate, but I can't imagine practicing without them from a mechanical standpoint, but I love that, taking them off, take a step back and look at what you're really working with. And, we're in the business of trust. So that's a huge factor.
Right. So let's go into what are some of the KPIs for hygiene.
Yeah. I think some of the key points you want to make sure that your hygiene department is working hard on at all times are the reappointment rate. How many people are leaving the practice with their next hygiene appointment? The next one is the pre-appointment rate, which could in fact be even more important, which is telling you how many people in your active patient base actually have a scheduled appointment for hygiene and or restorative. But particularly hygiene, you want to make sure that that's hitting at a nice place so that you're retaining folks and they're not walking out the door or at least disappearing for a lengthy period of time. This one might be a little bit more manual at times, but you always want to check on the ratio of number of filled to available appointment time blocks in any given month. That can be, you'll see here, it's a leading KPI to see how the month is potentially going to shape up, but it also can be a lagging KPI to review how the month went when the month is over.
Gives you a little bit of capacity. If those two aren't 100%, you have no capacity if you're at 100%.
Yeah, we like to see like 92% or better, somewhere north of 90% filled versus available. I think that's a good ratio. Give yourself a 10% buffer for some same day care in the hygiene department. When is the next available new patient block? If someone is going to be waiting weeks to come see you guys for a new patient experience, chances are pretty good they'll make the appointment, but they may not show up because the American consumer today is a little bit antsier than they might have been in the past. And so
it's such a polite way to put it. They want immediate satisfaction. They are Nintendo, right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Okay. So, how are your monthly membership fees stacking up? Like, what's your typical take on the monthly membership fees, whether you're collecting monthly or annually? I think there's a lot of philosophy on that, like continuity of care piece that comes with a monthly membership fee that just renews automatically. But it's kind of nice to also book that revenue right up front and get it ahead of time and realize that it represents future hygiene appointments. And those people tend to show up, once they've paid for those services. So it's a good thing. Fluoride utilization rate is another good one because it really does not pertain only to young patients or caries-prone patients anymore that we assume are young because of susceptibility as well as what they consume. Our elderly populations and so many of our patients are on devastatingly large medication lists. This is a huge adjunct to the hygiene department as far as a form of revenue. I like to always emphasize Google reviews or a review system because it really represents how we're doing. It's what people say about us when they're not right in front of us, and it's really important to see those come in, particularly in like paragraph format or what are called love letters. Those are very, very powerful for the growth of the practice. And I think you got to look at your restorative case acceptance. You should be working pretty strongly on case acceptance out of the hygiene department, because a lot of those people are already pretty well established. So the trust piece is already there.
Okay, so those are some important ones. Now, what are some of the things that we talk about lagging hygiene KPIs?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, some of these carry over and go both directions, because I think it helps to see both into the future as well as what is already performed. But, to hit on some of the different ones, the no-show and cancellation rates, of course, are going to be a big one for us. What is our perio diagnostic percentage as well as the acceptance percentage? Are we hitting a pretty good number there? What's the attrition rate look like, which is your number of new people divided by reestablished patients minus lost patients? Number of new and reestablished patients minus lost patients. Sorry, that was my mistake there. What are our net production collection adjustments and write-ups looking like?
Yeah,
and hygiene case acceptance as well.
Okay. So what we kind of expect of ourselves, you hit on this, and that's our next piece. So
yeah, I mean, I think always you have to stop and look in the mirror and say, well, we're in command of this project. So what do we want out of this? What would we want if we were a consumer of our business? It's always a great way to kind of flip the script and say, okay, go sit in the chair and pretend like you are a patient, and what would you expect? And so I think you should always be going above and beyond the standard of care. I think it goes without saying. We educate our patients on the value of optimal oral health.
The value of optimal oral health. Let that sink in for a second. The value of optimal oral health. Mm-hmm. It's important. I think there's going to be a number of people who can't articulate that. That's going to take some practice.
Yeah, there's some truth to that. I don't think it necessarily rolls off smoothly when you first say it, but it's definitely an important and intrinsic component to a healthy practice.
Correct.
I like platinum rules, like do unto others as you expect to have done to yourself. Being thorough. Neatness counts, I think, in our profession in a big way. Patients see that. So if the rooms are sloppy and messy, they're going to notice that, and they're going to think that maybe the quality of work and craftsmanship is a little off. I think you just have to get this pounded into your head. You need to run on time. That is a must, because it's the number one complaint people will lodge when they've left a practice and looking for a new home, is because they were always made to wait. And, just make it a rewarding experience, right?
Yep.
And so, when you're really knee deep in PPO contracts, you almost have to ask yourself, is it worth it to even provide hygiene services at all? Because so many of them are upside down. Okay,
so let's talk about some of the other things that people may or may not have a grasp of. And I think this is some great information to have on the tip of your tongue. When you're talking to a patient, let's say it's a patient you've seen in hygiene and you had them in a prophy program, and now you're paying more attention to your perio, your pocketing, your PSR scores. Now you're doing full mouth probing. And the reality of it is 60% of the U.S. adult population has a perio problem. That's a fact. You should be able to spit that off of your tongue. So you want to roll with these?
Sure. Yeah. I think it goes without saying, too, that the majority of, and almost super majority at times, of the actual restorative care a practice provides is going to come out of the hygiene department, because, again, you've established a rapport and relationship with these folks. New people we're always seeking, of course, because new folks coming through the door is just a healthy turnover and, weed the garden till the soil kind of approach. But
that number for those of you not seeing this is 70% of all restorative care comes out of hygiene department. It's a big tamale.
It is.
Okay.
I think it's pretty well known that only about half the U.S. adult population visits the dentist one time annually, and
Mm-hmm.
it's probably even gone down a bit since COVID because of the scare that took upon our profession and society as a whole. Many of you are probably like us. We're starting to see folks rolling back in after a 4-year hiatus
Mm-hmm.
from the dental chair, and many of them are not in such good shape,
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to see a big uptick and upswing in perio as well as tooth decay and just basic bread and butter concerns. I was on the American Academy of Prosthodontics website, and it mentioned 178 million Americans are missing one or more teeth,
Mm-hmm.
which took a bit to sink into me. And I think that could be skewed potentially a little bit with pediatrics, I guess, and mixed dentition. It didn't really quantify adult versus
Mm-hmm.
mixed versus pedo, but it's still a healthy number regardless. And we all
Well, I think
know
the
this.
number of people edentulous, let alone, is a huge number in the United States as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't doubt that. And then 5 million dental implants are placed annually in the United States. So,
And that number has skyrocketed because of the advent of the super generalist. And
right.
It's a great thing, but we're still got to pay attention. These things aren't going to be bulletproof if we don't take care of the periodontal health.
All right. So let's say our next slide is going to talk about basic goals, and then that 3 times hourly rate. So in this scenario where the hygienist is a $50 an hour employee, their hourly rate, you want them to look like it's $150 an hour, right? Minimum.
Sure.
That's 3x. So if you're doing, an 8-hour day, that's your 10-hour day, that's your 1,500. An 8-hour day, now you're at that 1,200 range.
Mm-hmm. And those are just basic stats. I don't think they're ironclad. It's just sort of a barometer at this point in time to seek. If we start setting our thresholds for hourly rates higher and higher and higher, we're going to have to find a way to make this work for us. So
yeah, because as hygiene pay increases because of whatever the reason, it's got to show up somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Like I said a few minutes ago, we should be seeking at least a 92% filled appointment rate. So that's just number of filled versus available should be in that ratio of 0.92. An 85+% reappointment rate is a pretty good number. You start getting into the mid 90s and up, and that number starts to have that stat has diminishing benefit, because you'll start to see an increased no-show rate. So in a
92%, just to give you some real estimates, if you have, let's say you work 7 hours one day, 8 hours the next day, so of 15 hours, it's approximately one of those hours is unfilled.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be at your 92%, right in that vicinity.
Most of us are not probably there, because what happens is you get the last minute no shows and cancellations.
Yeah, it's killing us right now.
Quite a bit. It's killing us right now too.
Killing us. All right. So, and then 30% is devoted to perio code. So again, that's getting closer, even though we know that's 60% of adults. So, you know.
And then you want your hygiene department to be about a third of your total practice production too. I think that's a healthy number. In a super GP practice, that may decline a little bit because of the skewed nature of the fee profiles between the services being provided and the restorative versus hygiene department. But a third is a good, healthy ratio. 80 to 85%, try to get them confirmed electronically. I mean, people just don't want phone calls or postcards in the mail or old-fashioned methods of communication anymore, for the most part. So you'll still have your 15% or so that will respond more favorably to analog methods, but this will help increase your fill rate as well as productivity rate as well, in addition. Okay. And if you can get that pre-appointment percentage up to 60% or better, you'll be in good shape. We can skip that next one and go on to the next key we can skip the downtime protocols. This was specific, I think. I mean, that could be a whole different topic in itself. I mentioned earlier, I think we're in the business of trust.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a real big factor. And your hygiene team is probably charged with the task of maintaining that the most, because they've built relationships. People think of going to the dentist more about to go see the hygienist than any other experience, time and time again. So you want a rock star hygiene department that is really showcasing the uniqueness or the brand quality of your practice. And so it's not difficult to do. It just has to be attended to and continually make sure that the experience is going first rate.
Okay, let's keep it moving.
Let's keep moving. Yeah.
I'm going the right way.
Yeah.
No, going the wrong way. Here we go. Okay, the membership plan, we've talked about that. Let's keep going past that. Co-diagnosis.
It kind of goes without saying that's one of the main charge orders of your hygiene department, is to set the docs up for success. So co-diagnostic skills and getting equilibrated or on the same page as far as your treatment planning philosophies, and therefore will look seamless to a patient, and therefore your case acceptance will go up. We talked about block scheduling already. I think that kind of goes without saying. I mean, how to get to 3 times the hourly rate, you have to probably get yourself uncoupled or unattached to PPO contracts to start with in order to get to these reimbursement rates to begin with. But if you're not quite there yet, it's going to be difficult, I think, to achieve those goals in this day and age, given where we've gone in the hygiene salary department, for one, and the deflationary rates of reimbursement.
So let's talk about assisted hygiene, because you haven't touched on it yet, but I know that's a consideration. So
yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big deal in my organization, and again, we're fee for service. And I think what we've discovered through experience and feedback from our patient population is that if it's done well, it's almost as rewarding of an experience as any other format. And so in our practice, currently I have 2 full-time hygienists and an assistant, and the assisted format is run on Tuesdays and Thursdays and every other Friday. And so it's 2.5 days a week out of 5. And what we've discovered in summary is that patients cannot and must not feel rushed. Otherwise, you're back to the PPO mill, and it almost is worse, because then the patients will complain even more about not seeing the hygienist.
Yeah.
You got to have time to review any unscheduled treatment in the patient's chart, and have that relational element go full swing. Like you said, take off the loops, step back, and have a conversation with the patient. And I think your quality of care has to be matched and almost unmatched to any previous experience.
Okay, now we're going to get into the meat. Now let's just 2021. Right. Let's talk about what you discovered as you went into this now, right?
Yes. In earnest, we had already pretty much eliminated all of or had migrated away from all the contracts by the end of 2020, except for MetLife and Delta Dental. And MetLife was our project for 2021, and Delta Dental was our project for 2022. And so in 2021, at my main practice, what I did is I just took equivalent periods of time, so I had equal comparison experience with the data. And so I just did the first 4 months of the year, since we were at the end of April when I was doing this program and putting it together for my clients. And so I just did the comparison in my own practice, just almost for grins. I just kind of wanted to see. I had in the back of my mind where we were at, but I didn't have anything concrete. So back then we had earned $52,000 in membership fees by the end of April. We had grossed $343,000 in hygiene, and we had netted
the first third of the year, just so people don't see it.
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry, it's first 4 months of the year.
All right.
We had netted $184,000 of hygiene revenue. So we adjusted off, or wrote off, I should say, to be specific, $67,000 of, excuse me, we wrote off $91,000 and almost $92,000 to insurance write-offs, and we had $67,000 in adjustments. Those adjustments are specific to hygiene visits on our membership program that had occurred in that first 4 months of the year.
So you're 184,000. That's your net too. So your
net
343 now goes to 236 because you took the write-offs out, right?
Basically, yes.
So 343 comes down to 236.
Well, yes, because here's what I like to do, and I may not be spot on with this, but I like to consider the membership revenue that's generated in any given period of time that we're analyzing as hygiene revenue, because those membership fees in my practice represent future hygiene visits. And even though it's booked out into the future, it's accrued then. But we'll be writing off 100% of those services up then. So that's how I came to 236. I added 184 to 52. Right.
That was to your net. I would think that if you take 343 and you add in the 52, now you're at 390.
Sure, and then you adjust off and write off the others.
150.
That's how you end up at 236. You get there the same way. Yes.
Okay.
And so
that makes sense.
Yeah. So the 236 of revenue we generated for the practice in the hygiene department was spread out over 3.5 full-time equivalent hygienists. So we had 3 full-time and 1 part-time back then. And so that amounted to about $16,860 average production per month per hygienist.
So just to give people some facts here, right? So on approximately $400,000 over 4 months as gross, we'll count the 343 and the 52. That's your gross. That's about $100,000 a month. When your adjustments and your write-offs, subtract 150. So it's like subtracting 40 grand a month. So you're at 60,000 a month. So you've lost 40% of your revenue is written off to insurance.
Yes.
That's not a big tamale. That's a big tostito and a big taco.
It's probably a nacho plate that's just stacked with there's a lot of ingredients on there. It's real. Yeah. And so just recall that we were out of network or uncoupled from all contracts except MetLife and Delta through 2021.
So let's
next
go,
slide will be
2022. Okay.
And so we actually, for the same first 4 months of the year, we actually declined by $2,000 in membership fee generation. We grossed about the same.
343 to 340. Yep. So real numbers, folks, if you're just listening, membership from 2021 was 52. Membership in 2022 is 50. The gross went from 343 down to 340. The net went from 184 to 177. So kind of linear. The adjustments and the write-offs, though, a little bit less.
They are, but not
the adjustments
substantially.
The adjustments are higher. The write-offs are less, but not much.
Probably what I think that's attributable to be honest with you, is we started doing a lot more monthly collections of our membership fees, and so that's why you see the membership rates down just slightly, but it's almost negligible.
So again, take back to 2021 now. The adjusted gross revenue of 236 is now 227. So that's almost minimal, right?
It is, but we were down to 3.
Go ahead.
I was just saying
Go ahead.
Okay. So we went from 3.5 to 3 full-time equivalent hygienists from 2021 to 2022.
So we're losing a half a hygienist time, right? And the net per hour went from 16.8, again, we'll call that 17, went to 18.9, we'll call that 19. So
not a huge jump.
Increase. 2016 is
It's decent.
It's 10, 15%.
It is decent. And just recall that we were only attached to Delta Dental at that point.
So
and
you
that's
drop
just
one.
it's clear reflection that Delta represents and represented the lion's share of our PPO contracted population.
So 2023.
And here we are through the first 4 months of this year. Our membership collection rates went up to 65,000.
Okay.
We grossed $240,000 in the hygiene department, and we netted $145,000 of hygiene revenue. Our adjustments went up to $94,000, but our write-offs went to $1,045.
So look how write-offs went to zero.
Basically went to zero because we're out with everything. So our net adjusted gross revenue is $210,255, and that's with 2 hygienists.
Okay, so let's go back to 2021. 236 adjusted gross revenue with 3.5 full-time hygienists. Now you drop, it's almost 50%, but you drop 40% from 3.5 down to 2, and that 236 now looks like 210.
But just remember, that's two full-time hygiene providers.
I understand that. I'm saying that,
and an assistant.
That's not a linear change.
No.
Right?
And I expected a revenue to decline because of losing the contracts.
Yeah, if you lost 40% of your production capacity, right, by losing a hygienist and a half, you didn't have a 40% drop. You had, from 236 to 210, you lost 10% maybe.
That's right.
So you dropped 40% of producers and you lost 10%. So what you're doing is you're working smarter, not harder.
That's right. Because now those 2 folks generated roughly $26,281 each per month in the first 4 months of this year.
Awesome.
Which was astonishing to me. It was just like, wow, this is pretty amazing. It's kind of an eye opener. Hygiene is really a profit center.
What do you attribute it to? I mean, if we'll take the slide away and I said to you, okay, Tom, back against the wall. I'm a pushy doctor. I'm in your face. I've got you on your heels. All right. So what happened? What would you say?
Well, I mean, I think you have to realize that we spent. Well, I learned finally the proper way to handle reducing insurance dependency by having as much face-to-face interaction with patients as possible. And we took our time and addressed this issue with almost every active patient in the MetLife community, as well as Delta Dental. And we expected the attrition. We saw the attrition. It's been pretty robust at times of late, especially with Delta, because as we all know, they tend to assign the benefit to the patient, or they don't even provide out-of-network benefits. And so they're all over the map when it comes to how they handle out-of-network visits. But
what does that number look like now? Do you have a grasp on that? Like how many people that you've gone out of network? The 2 big ones for you were MetLife and Delta. Do you have any idea what your attrition was? How many you lost?
It's close to probably 25% of our total patient population.
25%. So you lost 1 out of 4 patients that were in those plans, but those 3 out of 4 are now paying 40% higher.
Yes. And a good number of them actually have converted to our membership plan in the process of switching.
Or they do drop their insurance.
Or, they may have been on either an individual plan, or maybe they have a Medicare supplement plan, or they're at a point of open enrollment and the timing worked out, but that we did see a pretty big uptick in membership.
Right, because you saw the numbers. The numbers went from 52 in 2021 to 60.
65, yeah.
65. So again, that's that's a 15, 50, that's a 30% growth rate.
And so I think what also we're finding, we are discovering our floor in terms of our minimum, an attrition, as well as the effect of leaving these contracts. And it is a bit of a dark tunnel, and it does certainly scare quite a few folks, and therefore to the point at times where they just are paralyzed and don't want to do anything except remain with the contracts to keep the numbers up. We have holes in our schedule, but we're making goal with, you know, a schedule with more than 8% opening at times. It's also allows for a lot of same day care, and I think that is one of the hallmarks to a successful transition. It is exhausting, for sure.
So let me ask you now about your hygienists. How do those hygienists, I'm assuming those hygienists, those two which are full-time, were part of your 3.5 that were full-time.
Yes.
How do they feel about how they're working now? Are they working harder? Are they seeing more patient? Is it more taxing on them? Talk about what their experience is.
They are about the happiest I think I've ever seen them. And I don't even have them well out and above market rate in terms of hourly. They've settled in at a spot where we feel like we're paying it forward with them on their hourly rate. Denver has been a pretty rapid growth market in terms of acceleration on salaries, just not unlike anywhere else. But we're right at market rate, I think, with them, and they're super happy. They're both pretty flexible folks, and they actually like their time off, and so we've adapted a schedule where when we get a pretty big bomb all of a sudden in the day, they'll alternate and condense schedules and leave early because they have other interests outside of the practice. And it gives them the latitude for that type of a life-work balance.
Fantastic. So what would you say now to, again, that the person listening in who may not be watching it, and that's perfectly fine. They're listening in and they're saying, how can I do this? Hygiene is difficult, and we are full. How can I do this? How can I get my head around this? Besides the numbers, the proof's in the numbers, but what would some of your words be to allay a person's fears about that dark tunnel?
Sure. I think you have to stop and really discover the why for yourself. You have to say, okay, why would I want to drop these contracts in the first place? And I think that's fairly self-explanatory in this day and age. I think it's kind of a universal message at this point. Practices are just flat out losing money on a daily basis, staying directly contracted with most of these plans. So that's number one. Number two would be, are you experiencing any major attrition in your team? Is there burnout, stress, and overload that's starting to take shape in your practice where you're feeling it? Because I can assure you, if you're feeling burnt out, the rest of your team is really burnt out as well, because you're working them doubly hard when you're trying to see basically 4x the number of patients in order to make up the write-off, or the haircut, as we like to call it, in that department. And so then you stop and look and say, okay, how many exams are you doing in a month as a practitioner? And if you're exceeding some pretty well-known numbers or standard healthy numbers in a month, chances are pretty good the quality or the attention to detail is starting to potentially become in question. I won't say it's at risk or it's already gone beyond that. It's just you have to stop and realize that may be starting to diminish as well. And how long do you expect yourself to practice dentistry? Because this is a marathon of sprints, and it's a really grueling, difficult business at times. And at this clip, you're going to burn out even faster. I can assure you, at the volumetric approach. It's just a matter of time.
Okay, just a matter of time. I don't need to really add anything to that comment. So if people want to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Any number of ways. Certainly out there in the world of Facebook and Instagram, but certainly a text message to me on my cell phone. I'm happy to receive that. So that's area code 303-906-4788. You can also reach me by email at dr.tcreed@gmail.com. And lastly, I'll just say, if you're interested in any further review and you want to jump on a call, and you want to see kind of what we do ahead of time in the coaching realm, check out dynamicdentalascension.com. And I'll send Dr. Spera a link to that website. And that's my coaching web page. And that would be a great place to start.
You hit it. You hit it. You got it out of the park. At least a triple. If people have no idea what's going on, it's at least a triple.
Well, in the world of baseball, that's like Hall of Fame territory. If you're hitting, those kind of numbers and hitting consistently, as you know. So we can do far better in this profession if we all pull together, for sure.
Well, I think the message also is it's not a unicorn. You don't quote have to be a unicorn, but you do have to know how to do a couple of simple math equations. And I take it. And, the conversation I had with Dr. Paul Goodman, too, you're still going to have people have insurance as part of the conversation.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like, we just ignore insurance. No, you have insurance. We understand that. That's going to help you do X, Y, Z. And it may slow down the speed at which you acquire the things that we're recommending. And it may ultimately change our treatment plan because it may take longer if you're following that as your crutch. That's the reality of it. But I do think it's not a unicorn. It's there and it's tangible. But if you do simple math, and I think some folks just have to sit back and look at it and say, what is it really? What's the true cost of my services? And then what's my true income for these services? After all is said and done, what's that number? And how do you combat that with the raising cost of supplies, raising cost of
labor?
Big one is labor, and also the your rent or whatever those other factors you want to group them into. Your hard fixed costs. It's not cheaper to buy a dental chair. It's not cheaper to buy equipment. Those haven't plummeted in price. So, and if you are practicing, you're going to have some things to do it. You're going to need CBCT. You're going to need certain things, and those are not really cheap. They come with a cost, and you get to a point where don't compromise.
That's exactly right. And I think what you hit on here just a minute ago is really understanding how a dollar flows through your practice from start to finish, and to see what happens to it along the way is a huge exercise that, of course, is never able to be taught prior to actually being in the business. It's just not really practical to do so ahead of time in the educational process, and that's just the way it is. And so having I think the fellowship of folks that have experienced it before, like what you guys have created here in this arena, is huge, because it isn't a unicorn process. It's really pretty simple and straightforward, as long as your mindset as the practice owner has been well established up front. And that's generally where we start. We got to get in the head of the practice owner first.
I could not agree more. I think that's the common denominator to every discussion I've ever had with anybody, is their mindset is set. The burn the boats mentality. We're not going back. This is, and it comes from when you say and you understand it's best for the patient.
It is.
Versus it's really best for my pocketbook. If it's best for your pocketbook, that's going to ring hollow. And that's going to be a very hard time sleeping, because now you're greedy. Now you're this. No, this is better for the patient.
That's right.
Then your conversation flows.
That's right. Why did you get into dentistry in the first place? Why did you choose dentistry as a profession? Right. If it's for the pocketbook, well, it's a great way to make a living. Don't get me wrong. I'm privileged to be a part of this profession. It's a pretty unique set of skills that we all have that we take to the marketplace every day. But if you can't, I don't like the idea of restricting access to our schedule because of an insurance contract that maybe that person really didn't have any say in the first place. I don't find that to be natural. It's not, it just doesn't feel right, but it's a business at the end of the day. And you have to think of ways creatively to sustain its viability so that it can thrive. And therefore, be insurance friendly and figure out what that means to you.
In the words of Dr. Paul Goodman, we don't want insurance to have a seat at the table when it comes to discussing your needs.
That's right. I love that. That's beautiful.
It's just short and sweet.
And that will take some practice to roll off of your tongue as well, because that is a very profound statement. And I totally 100% agree with it. And that's at the core of our philosophy and practice as well.
Makes it easier. Well, thanks again, Tom. I appreciate you on a Memorial Day, and to all our veterans and all the people who've sacrificed so much so that we could be here doing this. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you as well. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Fee-for-Service Dentist Podcast. If you would like to share your fee-for-service story, please fill out our contact form at ffsdentistry.com. Also, be sure to join our Fee-for-Service Dentistry Facebook group. For help starting your dental membership plan, visit dentalmembershipdirect.com and membershipmastercourse.com. Finally, for help with in-house financing, visit dentalfinancingdirect.com. And don't forget, your story is what you make of it. This is your name on the door and your reputation on the line. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.